And now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today. Liesl McConchie is an international expert on how the brain learns and co-author of Corwin's best-selling book, Brain-Based Learning with Dr. Eric Jensen. In addition, she's the sole author of one of Corwin's newest releases, Building a Positive Math Identity, a Brain Science Approach. With more than 25 years of experience in education, Liesl bridges her knowledge of how the brain best learns to create strategies to support teachers and schools across the globe. She has a rich background in education that includes creating new schools, leading whole school reforms, delivering workshops to educators, and speaking at conferences around the world. And with that, I'll hand it over to Liesl.
Thanks, Debbie. Debbie is my amazing editor. And oh my goodness, when you get your copy of this book, whether you get the free ones for being here, I hope it's you, fingers crossed it's all of you, or if you find it another way, so much of the goodness of this book is due to Debbie and her amazing work in helping put this together. But I'm so excited to be with you all this afternoon, this evening, wherever you're coming from. I'm thrilled to share a sneak peek with you and share some insights into a brain science approach to building a positive math identity. My name is Liesl. It rhymes with diesel, if that helps you. Unless you're a big Sound of Music fan, can I get like a thumbs up or a hand raise? Anyone here like big Sound of Music fans? Have you seen the movie The Sound of Music? Oh, there's a heart, there's some thumbs up, yay. So Liesl is the oldest daughter in The Sound of Music. She was the one who would sneak out with the like telegram delivery boy and like would leap around the gazebo singing, I am 16 going on 17. Da, 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 da. Okay, we won't sing all evening together. But spoiler alert, that relationship, Liesl with Rolf, very, very toxic. It did not turn out well at all. But we are not here to talk about the toxic relationship between Liesl and Rolf. We are here to talk about a different relationship that for many of your students and mine is also really toxic. And that's their relationship with math. Now, I want to start by sharing with you a little bit about one of my former students right here. Now, this is Nico over here with the big red arrow wearing the big blue poofy jacket. Nico was one of my students who I had the privilege of teaching a few years ago when he was in kindergarten. And Nico had the most beautiful relationship with math. He just loved it. He was so curious about it. He loved when it was math time approaching. He would like jump up and down and he would like be squealing every time it was math time, every math game that we played, every math task that we would do. He just loved doing math. And he always had really creative solutions and strategies to work through with the math that we were doing. I remember one day when we were doing this activity called Race to Zero. And the way Race to Zero worked is that we started at 50. And the students were in these groups up at some whiteboards, and they each had a 12-sided die. And they would roll their big die, and whatever number they rolled, that's the number that they would subtract from the previous number. So starting at 50, subtract that number, and then they would roll again, subtract again, roll again, subtract again, roll again, subtract again, until they got all the way down to 0. And so here is what Nico's group's work looked like. They started at 50, they rolled a 2. And they're like, 50 minus 2 is 48. Then they rolled an 8. And so 50 or 48 minus 8 was 40. And you can see how they continued to roll. And then they were down at 2 right here. And while they were at 2, their next roll was an 8. Now, in most kindergartners' mind, they're like, yay, we made it, we got to 0. But not Nico. You could see the wheels churning in Nico's brain, and his eyes were kind of like glazed over, kind of like looking into some weird, mysterious space that maybe did or didn't exist. And with the guttural, like the most guttural sound that a little 6-year-old could utter, he just shouted to his group mates and to the entire class, negative numbers. And their first Nico, like in true Braveheart fashion. And the rest of his group was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Nico went on to explain negative numbers to all of his little 5 and 6 year old friends. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is such a magical math moment. I love it. What a great way to end our day. All right, let's go ahead and let's clean up everything. Let's get ready for dismissal. But no, 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 no. Nico and his group had other plans. They continued and stayed after school with their parents standing by waiting to pick them up. And they went and continued to roll all the way down to negative 200. All the way to negative 200. Now, it was just like Nico was just a joy to have in my class. And so when Nico's mom called me a couple years later, when Nico was in second grade, I was really surprised when Nico's mom was in tears. You see, Nico's relationship with math had taken a significant turn. And because he wasn't fast enough on his timed math tests, he had been labeled as being below grade level in mathematics in second grade. And I was like, I remember Nico talking about multiplication in kindergarten. Like, there's no way he's behind grade level in second grade. And all of his jumps and his squeals had turned into tears and flopping on the couch and just like desperation. And it was really heartbreaking to listen to Nico's mom share about Nico's experience with math. And I share this with you because depending on the grade level that you teach, you might be working with different versions of a Nico. You know, I was blessed to be Nico's teacher in kindergarten. I saw his most beautiful relationship with math. His second grade teacher, his third grade teacher didn't have the same experience. That relationship had shifted. Now, I've spent most of my career in education teaching middle school and high school math. My year working with Nico was my very first year teaching kindergarten, and boy, was it fun. But when, as a middle school and high school teacher, I was very familiar with having students walk into my class already hating math, already having a really negative, toxic, traumatic relationship with math. And having worked with Nico, I was reminded of something that I want to remind all of us of. And that's that every student that walks through our door used to be like Nico. At one point or another, they were jumping up and down and squealing and just like so excited because they could count to 10 or add 2 plus 3 or whatever it was. That every child that we work with, every student that we work with, every teenager that we work with has at some point had a positive relationship with math. And that gives us the hope that we need to know that that relationship is dynamic and always changing, and thus can return to a place of joy and curiosity and success, which is what we want. Which is why I am always reminding us of this neurological truth, that a student's emotional relationship with math is foundational to their cognitive relationship with math. How we feel about ourselves while we're doing math, how we feel about math while we're doing math, directly impacts our brain. Let's take a look at how this shows up for all of us. So let's just jump in. Let's do some math together right here. So here we have a simple math equation. It says, if 3x minus y equals 12, what is the value of 8 to the x over 2 to the y? So go ahead and take a couple minutes and just work on that. Feel free to drop your answer in the chat. And I'm just going to let you pause right there. Folks, we're not doing this math problem. We are not going to do it. No one's dropping anything in the chat. We're not doing this math problem, but I just want you to pay attention to what happened to you emotionally. Some of you might have been like, oh yeah, awesome. Woo, this is exactly what I want to do at 7 p.m. on the East Coast after a long day of teaching in the middle of the week. And others of you are like, oh my gosh, I teach like second grade math. Like, I have absolutely no idea how to do this. And all sorts of other feelings might have come up for you. And so I'm sharing this with you. I want us to experience this so that we understand that when we have these feelings of anxiety or shame or worry or whatever it is, that those directly impact our ability to engage cognitively with math. The connections between emotions and cognition are inseparable. And you just experienced it yourself, regardless of whatever emotion you just had. It either really helped your cognition, like, yeah, okay, I'm ready to go. Let's roll up the sleeves, where's some paper and pencil? And others of you are like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And even the resources you have available cognitively were shut down because the emotions that were flooding through your body and brain in that moment. Now, I believe this so much that when a school reached out to me a few years ago and was like, oh my gosh, Liesl, our kids have come back from virtual learning and they are not okay. They are struggling so bad. Their math scores have plummeted. We really need help. You are the brain-based learning guru, and we want you to help design an intervention program for us and our school district. And this school district up in Portland, Oregon was like, please help us. And I was like, I'd love to. And I will be more than happy to do that as long as I just had one caveat. And it was this. I said, there are so many intervention programs out there. There's like workbook ones where you can like worksheet kids to death. And there are like these online games that are disguised as math intervention programs and everything in between. I was like, if you want me to design an intervention program for you, you're coming to me for my expertise. This is what needs to happen. I will design a math intervention program for you that will teach the math in the most brain-friendly way possible. And I'm going to center the entire program around students' emotional relationship with math. And we're going to nurture that. We're going to heal that. We're going to foster that. And we're going to watch these kids succeed because we tend to both their emotional and cognitive needs with math. And so this is what we did. I designed the program. And then what I'm about to show you is we took like all sorts of data, right? We collected all this data as being good, evidence-based, data-driven people that we are. And I want to share with you a couple data points that we collected at the beginning of the intervention program. Now, these were sixth graders, so middle schoolers. These were sixth graders in Portland, Oregon middle schools who had been identified as being at least 2 years below grade level in mathematics. And so we collected a lot of data on them about their math skills, but we also collected some data on them based on their emotional relationship with math. And here's what I want to share with you. We asked students like, hey, answer this question, like how I feel about math. How would you score yourself on how I feel about math? Take a look at this. 52% of the students said, not good. 44% of them said, okay. And only 4% of the students said, I feel really good. That's 96% of these students who are not feeling great about themselves in math. Take a look at this next data point right here. The question was, the statement was, I am not good at learning math. So we're really tapping into their personal self-efficacy. How do they feel about their math skills right now? Like, how much do you agree with this statement? I am not good at learning math. Look at this. What is that? 70, 80, 84% of these students said, yep, that's very true or somewhat true about me. Let's take a look at one more. Students, the statement was, I feel like I belong in math class. Look at this. It's just heartbreaking. What is this? 79% of students saying like that is not true or somewhat true about me. I know. Yes, keep those emojis going, folks. Let those emotions out. It is real. This is true. These are real students in middle school. Now, the next slide I'm going to show you is going to be the scores of their pretest. I created a pretest that was at third grade level because that's kind of where their math skills were. And these were sixth graders being assessed at third grade math standards. Now, what percentage do you think passed the pretest? These are two different middle schools in the Portland area. We defined passing as being 50% or higher. So, what percent, you can make a prediction, you can drop it in the chat. What percent of these sixth graders passed at a 50% level a third grade level assessment? You ready for it? 10%. 10%. Based on how they felt about it, how they perceived their ability, their sense of belonging. This is depressing, but not all that surprising if you really believe that a student's emotional relationship with math is foundational to their cognitive relationship with math. Now, some of you might be thinking, dang, those kids in Portland, like they've got some problems. Well, let's just quickly take a look at some national data. Here in the United States, what percentage of fourth graders are proficient at grade level math? Make a prediction. What do you think? Folks, it's 36%. 36% of our fourth graders are proficient at grade level math. Now, what do you think about when they get to eighth grade? What percentage of them are proficient at grade level math in eighth grade? Does it get better? Does it get worse? How much better? How much worse? Got a number in your mind? Is it 26%? Folks, a quarter of our students are proficient at grade level math. This is a problem. And I'm here to tell you, as someone who has studied the human brain and how it learns math for over 25 years, that this is not a problem that we're going to solve with another worksheet or another video game that's disguised as a math program. This is not a purely cognitive problem. This is an emotional problem with some cognition wrapped in it. Now, some of you are like, okay, I get it, Liesl. I'm with you. I understand. But I've got standards to teach. I don't have time to have every student lay down on a couch and do therapy with them and unpack all of their math trauma. Like, how am I supposed to do this? I got you. I got you. I got you. Got you. Start with this. This next activity you can absolutely do with your students tomorrow. Yes, take it, steal it, borrow it, use it. It's an activity I called Mathland. And it is a 10-minute activity that you can do with any student at any grade level. And it will give you so much insight into your student's emotional relationship with math. Here's how it works. I just quickly introduce it as like, hey, imagine this place called Mathland. Some weird, mysterious place. Maybe it's like a planet far away in a different solar system. Maybe it's like an undiscovered civilization or a secret island somewhere. But whatever this place is, it's a place that's ruled by mathematics. Everything about it is ruled by math. And invite students to think like what would it look like there? What would it be like to be there? Are there people there? Are there any living things there? What does like the landscape look like? What are people doing there in this place ruled by math? And just let them draw for a few minutes. And you'll be astounded by what you see. Here's a few samples of what I've seen students draw with this activity. Yes, some students draw a beautiful place with hearts and clouds and flowers and the sun is shining and there's this lovely symmetry happening because it's very mathematical and there's numbers floating in the sky. This is the only one I've seen like that. The rest look very different. Perhaps you have a student who might draw something like this, or maybe you have students who might draw something more like this, where they feel like they're lost in the forest of Mathland. Or maybe for some of your students, Mathland feels like this place where this pool or this giant bowl of all these numbers that are all squeezed together. I'll read you what it says on the top. The student said this: how I see math is just a lot of numbers squeezed together. Hashtag confusing. This last one really breaks my heart. I'll give you a minute to take a look at it and to unpack all of the messages that this student is sharing with their teacher about how they feel about math and their emotional relationship with math. Please use the chat to share things that really stand out to you about this student's depiction of Mathland. Yeah. If this is how a student feels about math, how do you think that will impact how well they do, how much effort they give, how much curiosity they have around math, all the things that we want them to like dive into, like curiosity, the joy of math, engaging in productive struggle. Your comments are beautiful. Thank you for sharing them. They're depressing, but they're really right on. Like this student feels like math, like that school is a place of torture, that math only happens in school, that there's no math out in the real world. It's separate from his loved ones, as he says, "Help me," as his parents, I'm assuming his guardians say, "Bye, son. Please spare me." It's like this form of torture. And I'm here to tell you again, we're going to come back to it, that a student's emotional relationship with math is foundational to their cognitive relationship with math. What is happening in this child's brain, if this is how they feel about math, is most certainly just exploding with all sorts of neurochemicals and hormones and neurotransmitters that is not helpful for their cognitive process around learning math. Now, we only have 60 minutes here together today. And so we don't have a ton of time to dive into like really like unpacking the brain science of where our math identity is formed in the brain. But if you're anywhere where I'm speaking in the next few months, I have a very busy speaking schedule, you can stop me in a hallway and we can totally nerd out about the ventromedial prefrontal cortex or the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, and we can really unpack. But for now, I just want you to know that having studied the brain science of where our math identity is formed and how it is formed. Like, how is this relationship formed? I want you to know that ultimately there are four main variables that form our math identity in our brain, meaning how a student sees themselves in the context of math. So over the next 30 minutes, we're going to unpack these four variables. I'm going to give you a little bit of a nugget of neuroscience for each one, just so you understand a little bit about the science behind it. But mostly I want to share with you some really practical tools and strategies and activities that you can do with your students right away to help them grow in their relationship with math, foster a more positive relationship with math, heal whatever needs to be healed, and to put them on a path so that their emotional relationship with math supports their cognitive relationship with math. Let's get started. The first variable that impacts our students' relationship with math is their past experiences with math. Now, I know it would be really, really nice if we could just have students just kind of like tuck all of their past bad math experiences and all of their like math trauma, just kind of like shove it in their backpack and just hang it on those hooks that are in the hallway or in the back of a classroom, slam it in their lockers so they just don't come with them to class. Unfortunately, the brain does not work that way. All of that is coming with them into their classroom, and we cannot ignore it. Unfortunately, I wish we can. Many of you who have learned a little bit about the brain over your years of teaching might have heard something about like Hebb's postulate, which is that really catchy phrase that says neurons that fire together wire together. And we often talk about Hebb's postulate, neurons that fire together wire together. We often talk about it in terms of the importance of like reinforcement or retrieval practices or providing scaffolding for students, which is all true. But I want us to expand our understanding of this phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together, to include all of our past emotional experiences with math. That all of those feelings that they have had around fractions, that one time that math game went bad and they were, shamed in front of the classroom, all of those are also, those firings are wiring beliefs and attitudes and relationships about math in their brain. And those carry just as much weight as their cognitive wirings. So, what do we do about this? Here's one activity you can absolutely steal and use with your students. Please, please, please do this. To understand, now my book unpacks a lot of strategies. I'm just going to give you one for right now on how can you understand a little bit about your students' past experiences with math in a very short amount of time. Because like, I get it. Like we don't have all the time in the world in our classroom with our students. Here's a quick way to do it. Here's a simple activity called, I call it graph your math journey. Now, if you don't teach high school seniors, totally fine. Students can graph up to whatever grade level they're in and just invite students to graph their experience, their relationship with math. Like, when were you in math? Like, really good. Like, yeah. When were you in math? Like, meh. And when was your relationship with math? Like, on the rocks. Like, this is not good stuff right here. Let's take a look at one sample of some students' work here. This is another sixth grader who graphed their math journey. Now, in the chat, drop in a question or two if you want to, overachieving teachers. Drop in a question. If you could have like a one-on-one conference with a student just for like a minute, 90 seconds, what is one question you would like to ask this student right here? And imagine if students did this activity, shared it with you. You could just simply write your own question on a post-it note on their graph. They could write it back to you, almost kind of like a back and forth journal kind of thing, even if you don't have the time to have a one-on-one. There's just so much information in this picture that can really help us in our efforts to help students learn math. What would you want to know? Oh, look at all these questions. Oh, this is great. Oh, I love it. Okay, I'm just scanning the chat, obviously, if you can't tell. So many great questions. These are all fabulous. And imagine what you could do. I'm just thinking about like Sarah Vanderwert's like her name, gosh, what does she call them? Her name, shoot. The beginning of the year, like nameplate kind of activity she does to get to know her students. If you could do something like similar, but just with this graph, like back and forth, tense, thank you, Lisa, and just have like a written conversation with a student about what's going on here. I just want to point out something else. Remember the other student who was like, send them to school for 50 million years? And how long that like school felt and math in school felt. I just wanted to point out, like, look at how interesting the scale on this axis right down here on this x-axis. Look at how long first grade felt for this student. Look at how long fourth grade felt for this student and how that relates to what the graph is doing at that time. There's so many fascinating things. We could really just like dissect all the samples I have, but that's not what we're here to do today. Graph your math journey, again, is an activity you can take and borrow and use with your students. Please do modify as needed for your students and their grade level and their age ability. But the main takeaway from this right here is that this variable of students' past experiences play a critical role in their current math identity. And we must find time and ways to help students heal from the past. Now, what's beautiful about this activity is that you can share your graph as well with your students. And as you can see, like, they're up and down all over the place. And it's such a beautiful reminder of the principle of neuroplasticity, which is like our nugget of neuroscience for this variable here. And that is that the brain is constantly changing. Our relationship with math is constantly changing, and how it's up and down and up and down. And so I love the questions in the chat of like, what do you hope for in seventh grade? That's like such a hopeful question and reinforces the principle of neuroplasticity of like, look, what happens in seventh grade is it's up to us. Like, let's work together and let's create the relationship that you want to have with math. And that we can share from an authentic and vulnerable place about our own relationship going up and down all over the place and foster that hope for change, that their past does not define their future. So that's our first variable. Now, before we get into our second variable that defines our math identity, I just wanted to check in, get those emojis ready with like your hand raising and things like that, or a thumbs up. How many of you like knew from a very early age that you wanted to be a math teacher? Like you were an early, where's my hand? You were an early math teacher. How many of you decided like later on in life that you wanted to be a math teacher? How many of you still are wondering how the heck you found your way into the teaching profession? Like, I still don't even know how I ended up here, but here I am. Maybe you thought you were clicking on a different Zoom link and all of a sudden you ended up in a webinar about math teachers and math identity. I don't know. But here we are. So I was one of those students who decided at a very, very young age that I wanted to be a math teacher. Here I am in my fifth grade yearbook back in the 80s, still trying to master like the 80s bangs that I never was able to master. This is my fifth grade yearbook listing out my ambition that I wanted to be a math teacher, which is cute and sweet and everything, but it was really comical when you look at the whole page from the yearbook about how the person on above me in the yearbook was like, I'm going to be in the NFL. And the person below me is like, I want to be a ballerina. And then there's me, I want to be a math teacher. And I loved math. I knew I wanted to be a math teacher. And I never wavered from that dream of mine. And so by the time I left elementary school, I went into middle school. I started having math specific teachers. And boy, oh boy, did I study them intently. And I learned a lot about what I wanted to be as a math teacher and what I didn't want to be as a math teacher from some of them. But my sixth grade math teacher was a white male. And my seventh grade math teacher was a white male. My eighth grade math teacher was also a white male. My ninth grade math teacher was a white male. My 10th grade math teacher was a white male. So by the time I got to 11th grade and I'm starting to think about college and what I wanted to major in my career, I started having some questions. I was starting like looking around like, can only white males be math teachers? Like what's going on? Like can girls be math teachers? Do you have to be white to be like what is going on here? Because I didn't see anyone like me being a math teacher, which had an impact on my math identity in that phase. Which brings us to our second variable. And that is what hasn't even happened yet for our students, their future. You see, our past experiences with math collide with our future vision of ourself in math spaces to create our math identity. Now, the future hasn't happened, but it's all about what do I see when I look to the future? Can I see people like me, people that I can relate to doing stuff with math? If I can, it helps me have a better math identity right now. If I can't, well, that does something different. And for that, we need to go take a look at Hollywood for a minute because Hollywood does an incredible job of explaining this nugget of neuroscience. And that is when you watch any teen flick, it's almost always the same kind of storyline where you have the jocks and the cheerleaders, like the real hip, cool in crowd. And then you have the nerds and the band geeks and the math kids, and they're like the outsiders. So, in neuroscience terms, in psychology terms, we call them like the in group and the out group. And Hollywood gets it right. And it's always like this desire for someone in the out group to be part of the in group. And that's a very natural biological draw that we experience. Now, what Hollywood doesn't explain, because this doesn't sell tickets, is why are we drawn to be in the out group? Because what is the experience like for people in the out group? Being part of the out group is extremely stressful. Literally, over 50% more cortisol is released in the brain when we feel like we don't belong. We feel like we're part of the out group. So if I don't feel like I'm a math person or I'm not good at math while I'm in math class, I'm literally experiencing higher levels of stress in my math class. And that higher levels of cortisol is impacting the learning centers of my brain, making it more difficult for me to engage in mathematical thinking. Which is why it is absolutely essential that students must be able to look to their future and see people that they can relate to in math spaces. Otherwise, the only vision that they have usually looks something like this. When I have students draw, what do you think like a math person looks like? Someone who's good at math, a mathematician. These are the images that students often come back with. These white males or Asian males with glasses, wild, crazy hair, like collars, weird fashion kind of thing. I wrote about this in an NCTM article last year. You can go take a look at there, the February edition, an article called Drawing a Positive Math Identity. It will walk you through this whole exercise and activity that you can do. So I'm not going to share that one with you. I'm going to share a different one with you just to give you as many resources as possible in the short time we have. So in addition to this activity, which you can go learn about, I also like to share something called belonging bios, is what I call them, just because I like alliterations. Belonging bios are introducing students to people of diverse backgrounds, people that they can relate to, out there doing cool stuff with math. Now, I'm not talking like people from like 1200 BC, black and white pictures. Like, I want students to see like cool, young, current people doing cool things with math. Here's one of the people I like to share with students. This is Noemi Sepulveda. She self-identifies as a first-generation Mexican STEMinist, which I love that phrase so much. Now, Noemi, she's on her third internship at NASA, combining her love of mathematics and fashion, as you can see by her bow tie. Because Noemi is working on a project to design the next generation of space suits that astronauts will walk on the moon with, making sure that mathematically they are able to withstand the elements of space. How cool is that? For some students, they really connect with Chica Ophelia, who's 12 years old and who just recently discovered a new divisibility rule for dividing by sevens. Here's a young kid who is doing really cool math thinking. I have an entire collection of belonging bios that I'll share with you how you can access them towards the end of our webinar together. But here's the main takeaway for this variable. Students need to see a future for themselves. The way we do that is we provide representation for all our students. Now, let's jump into the third variable. So we've talked about the first two, past and future, which is like how our identity is formed bidirectionally through like the space-time continuum, right? Our past and our future coming together in this weird Marvel kind of way. Now, the third and the fourth variable are a different direction, different combination. To help you understand that, let's go back to my childhood, the 80s and 90s. I grew up watching TGIF, Steve Urkel on Family Matters. Can I get an emoji if you ever watched Steve Urkel and Family Matters? Please don't make me feel so old. Oh, yes, I am not alone. All right, now I grew up on Steve Urkel and Family Matters. Now, Steve Urkel embodied nerd culture. You can see him here. Like, look at those jeans. My gosh. They are way up high with the big suspenders. He's this scrawny, skinny, pelvic protruding kid with really thick glasses. Remember his really nasal noise? Did I do that? He had no luck with the ladies, and he was just like a brilliant kid. And we wonder why people in my generation weren't racing for STEM fields. Because this, where am I? This is the image that was being communicated to us as to what it means, what it looks like to be good at maths and sciences. Like, who wants that? Who wants to have like no social life, always be struggling in romantic relationships, being really awkward? Now, an interesting fact is that Steve Urkel, he was slotted to just be on a single episode of Family Matters. Just one guest appearance. Now, Family Matters was really struggling in the ratings, but the episode that aired with Steve Urkel on it was such a hit that they kept him on. And the show continued on for many, many more years and seasons because nerd culture brought it back, which is a whole different conversation that we could have about how the media takes advantage and I don't want to say like demonizes, but like nerdifies math for their own gain. Now, I also grew up in the day and age of like Barbie dolls, where half the population wanted to be Barbie. One of the Barbie dolls back in my childhood was called Teen Talk Barbie, where there was a button on the back of Barbie. You could push it, and Barbie would like say some things. One of the messages that Barbie said was, "Math class is hard." This is not okay, folks. This is not okay. The third variable that impacts our students and ours forming math identity is all these socio-cultural influences. They can come from the media. They can come from our TV shows. They can come from our toys. They can come from our family of origin, from what our messages our parents say about us, being a math family or not. Sometimes they even come from us in our classrooms. They can come from celebrities. They can come from the latest TikTok craze, talking about girl math or whatever. Don't even get me started. But here's what we need to understand is that there are sociocultural forces whispering or shouting messages about who is good at math and what it means to be good at math. And it is everywhere. Take a look at this advertisement in a magazine for a deodorant brand named Ban, B-A-N. Here, I'll make it a little bit bigger so you can see. Zoom it in. Drop it in the chat when you see how are they using math negatively to promote their own brand. Hey, buy this deodorant and you can ban all of these things. You see it right there up in the corner, right? Ban stress. Now, some people, when I share these types of things with them, some people are like, Liesl, come on. Isn't this kind of a stretch? Like, come on. This is really not that big of a deal. This kind of stuff happens all the time. It's everywhere. Here's your nugget of neuroscience for this variable. Of all the things that come at our brain all day long, all the inputs that come into our brain, what percentage of them do you think come in at an unconscious level? Like, come on, students don't really pick up on those messages. It's just like a subtle, unconscious thing. They're not even paying attention. What percentage of stuff do we take in that comes at that unconscious level? Make that prediction. Get your brain curious. It wants to know. So many things we could talk about in terms of curiosity and how it impacts the brain. But folks, it's over 90%. Over 90%. So all of these messages that students are hearing, it's getting in. And again, neurons that fire together, wire together. Those messages are solidifying their attitudes, beliefs, their feelings, and understandings around who is good at math and what it means to be good at math. So what do? We take a couple minutes, not even that long if we need to. I like to create as a tradition. I like acronyms like Math Media Monday, where we just every Monday take 90 seconds and I just share something like this. I just share something like this. I just share something like this. And we just unpack. Hey, what are they trying to say? And about who? We just pull the curtains from behind the way that messages are being shared about math, and then we correct it. What's actually true? What does someone who's good at math actually look like? Well, it looks like you and me. It looks like all of us. And why are they using this as a way to try to advertise their deodorant? So we confront these social cultural messages and help redefine for our students. We hold the narrative, we hold the microphone, not TikTok, not celebrity culture. We hold the microphone and we define for our students what does it mean to be good at math and who can be good at math. Now, this fourth and final variable is the one that gets all the attention. And this is actually about us personally. What is my personal relationship with math? What is my personal efficacy? Now, efficacy is like a big fancy word, but when you break it down with Dr. Bandura's definition, it's just the combination of my math competence and my math confidence. And adding those two together creates my personal efficacy. Now, these two do play a role. Of course, how good I am at math is going to impact my math identity and my relationship with math, as well as my level of confidence with it. Now, before we dive into this last variable too much, I really need to pause us and say something because everywhere I look, every article I read, every blog I read, every news report I see talking about math identity really likes to lean into this one. And I get it. It's the easiest one to see. It seems like the one that we have most influence over in our classroom. But I have to give a gentle voice of warning that we can't put all the responsibility on the individual learner for what has happened to them in their past, their access to future representational belonging, and the socio-cultural messages that society screams at them. We can't just say hey, have a growth mindset. Hey, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. When math boots have historically been designed to only fit certain people. So yes, this variable matters, but let's remember that it is a balance of all four of these variables that's really going to lift our students' math identity. Now, with that said, there are things that we can do to help their personal relationship with math currently. Now, the reality is that students do need strategies. I'm not saying don't talk about growth mindset. They need strategies for moments when they question their identity within math spaces. Frustration and failure, they're normal. This is normal. This is a human experience. Students just need to know what do they do when they get stuck in a math problem, when they feel frustrated and they're starting to feel anxious, when they're feeling hopeless? What do they do? Because the feelings that they have, again, their emotional relationship with math is foundational to their cognitive relationship with math. Now, their neurobiological state has a direct impact on their learning. So when a student is feeling curious, anticipation, hopeful, confident, even a little confused or skeptical, these are positive neurobiological states, and they release cocktails of neurochemicals and transmitters and hormones in the brain that activate the learning centers of the brain and make learning easier and better for students. On the contrary, students who are experiencing a negative emotional state, when they're feeling fearful, anxious, frustrated, bored, disinterested, or insecure about themselves in math spaces, different hormones and neurochemicals and neurotransmitters are released that activate different regions of the brain that make learning more difficult. Woo, how's that for like a 35-second fast paced nugget of neuroscience? We could unpack that for hours. The takeaway here is this, is that we talk a lot about math anxiety, which is extremely common and makes math learning very difficult for students. So when students are feeling anxious, they need strategies. They need tools to get out of that state and into a more positive state. Here's one activity that can have a universal impact on your students. I call it math gremlins. Think about like the little angel and devil on the shoulder kind of thing of like the angel whispering good things to you and the little devil whispering those bad things to you. Similar concept, but with a math gremlin. Again, I invite students to draw what this little gremlin looks like. If you could give it a shape, a color, this little thing that like whispers unhelpful messages to you, what would that thing look like? Here's what one second grader drew for their math gremlin. And then I invite students to write a few phrases that their math gremlin says to them. Now, this second grader was in a class that used a lot of CGI, like cognitively guided instruction, and where everyone's like invited to approach a problem in their own ways and share out loud. So you can see the second grader saying things like, that strategy is weird. No one's going to like your strategy, or you got the wrong answer. And this gremlin says, I hate math across its chest. The power of drawing your math gremlin, what it does is it externalizes these negative emotions. What's really going on in the brain? Can we see this? Here's our little Lego brain. If you've never seen my Lego brain before, I worked in Denmark for a few years studying the Scandinavian school system and worked for Lego for many, many years and started a brand new school down the street from Lego headquarters. So did a lot of work with Lego education. So this is your brain, a scale model of your brain made out of Legos. I'm going to crack it open so we can see the limbic system in here, the inner portion of the brain, and this little blue region right here, this dark blue piece, that's your amygdala, your emotional control center of your brain. This is the part of your brain that's going to be feeding you all these negative thoughts, or your students all these negative thoughts and beliefs about themselves with math. And when it comes from the amygdala, it feels really personal. It feels like it's part of my identity. Instead, we want to have them draw it, personify it, because then it externalizes it and gets it out of them. And then we crumble it up, we throw it in the trash, and we give them more powerful things to say. We teach our students the self-regulation skills they need to navigate these normal emotions that they experience. Here's one mantra that I adopted with one class I was teaching one year. Baby Yoda was the craze for them at the time. And so every day we would say, I am a math master. I have the power to think, work, and improve every day. These numbers and letters don't know who they're up against. I am a math master. Math master, I am. Now, folks, we have talked about so many things. You might be like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. There's so much information. Don't worry, I got your back. Oh, shoot. I am going to find a way to make sure that you can get copies of these slides, or you have the recording and you can be back to look at the slides. And I will find a way to help you get access to those belonging bios, some more math media. A lot of it is in my brand new book that was just released here with Corwin, and Debbie's going to help you figure out how you can get a bigger discount than this. But I just wanted to close by going back to Nico here. Now, we started with Nico in kindergarten. He was in my class. Last we heard from Nico, he was in second grade, throwing himself on the couch in tears, and his mom was in tears as well. Nico is now in fifth grade. Oh my gosh, they grow up so fast. Nico is in fifth grade. And I'm very happy to report that Nico has returned to jumping and leaping and squealing and doing backflips, not just on the gym mat, but emotionally with math again, because his emotional relationship with math, his math identity, has again returned to a really positive place. How did it get there? Well, we returned to his past. We helped him heal from those past experiences, those traumas he had in second grade, and helped him unpack it. As a gymnast, he has found access to representational belonging of people who are doing awesome things that he really appreciates, who are also really great at math. His parents really helped him to redefine what does it mean to be good at math? It's not about being the fastest on the timed math test. Who can be good at math? And really unpacking those and helping him develop the personal skills to combat those voices in his head. It's all about these four variables right here that help us understand how a student's emotional relationship with math is foundational to their cognitive relationship with math. And with that, Debbie wants to give you free copies of the book.
Thank you again to Liesl, and thank you to everyone who's joined us and participated today. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.